Good morning, or good evening, depending on which part of the disintegrating global order you are currently watching from. Today is May 6, 2026. If you have opened the New York Times today, you have seen a masterpiece of institutional delusion. They are pointing to a minor 3% dip in gasoline prices and whispering to you that diplomacy is finally winning, that the storm is passing. But I urge you to look closer at the data they are trying to hide in the fine print. This is not a recovery. This is the eerie, silent calm before the ultimate economic tsunami. We are currently witnessing the total and final failure of the so-called rules-based order. Washington truly believed they could weaponize the global financial system to crush a regional power like Iran without consequence. Instead, they have weaponized their own demise. The Strait of Hormuz is no longer just a waterway. It has become a functional guillotine for the petrodollar and the entire American debt architecture. Let us sit with the raw, cold mathematics for a moment, because the numbers do not care about political narratives. Gasoline prices across the United States have surged 52% since the first shots of this conflict were fired. But the truly terrifying number is the 20 million barrels of oil per day that are currently effectively blocked from the global market. The United States Navy, despite its multi-trillion-dollar historical prestige, has been forced to realize a painful systemic truth. You simply cannot protect a commercial tanker from a swarm of $1,000 drones and silent sea mines in a choke point that is only 21 miles wide. By forcing the Navy into what Donald Trump himself calls a piracy doctrine, seizing Iranian ships in international waters, the administration has effectively dismantled the last remains of international maritime law. When the self-proclaimed policeman of the world begins acting like a pirate, the insurance markets for global shipping do not just fluctuate, they collapse. This is why the markets are bleeding today, regardless of the smiles you see on cable news. This brings me to a deeper point about the intellectual rot at the heart of the empire. I spent years in the halls of Yale University. I sat in the very rooms where the architects of the current Project Freedom were trained. These people are masters of what I call institutional Guanxi, the belief that social networking, Ivy League credentials, and the manipulation of global bureaucracy can override the physical laws of supply and demand. They truly believe that if you repeat the word democracy enough times in a press briefing, the fundamental energy needs of a civilization will simply adapt to your narrative. They are catastrophically wrong. Reality is a cold mistress, and the Iranian leadership understands this better than anyone in New Haven. They know the American empire is built on a fragile foundation of cheap energy and infinite printable debt. By cutting off the energy, Tehran is directly accelerating the collapse of that debt. It is a systemic checkmate that no Western education prepared these elites to handle. Look at the subtle but violent shift in energy production reported this morning. Global refineries are now being forced to prioritize jet fuel and diesel over regular gasoline. This is a signature of a war-footing economy. It means the average consumer is being systematically sacrificed to keep the military machinery and the basic logistical chains of the state moving. In Europe, the situation has moved beyond desperate and into the realm of the pathetic. Berlin has finally realized that their celebrated green transition was actually a transition to no energy the moment the flows from Russia and Iran were severed. We are witnessing the deindustrialization of the European continent in real time, the direct price of following a hegemon that no longer possesses a coherent strategic plan for the 21st century. While the US Navy is playing Pirates of the Caribbean in the Gulf, Beijing is quietly and methodically rewriting the map of the world. China imports 50% of its oil from this exact region. If they were truly concerned about American naval power, we would see their fleet in the Gulf. We do not. Why? Because Beijing understands that every day this war continues, the United States burns through its remaining conventional strength, its strategic petroleum reserves, and its last shred of global credibility. China is positioning itself as the only adult in the room. They are speaking to the Saudis, the Emiratis, and the Iranians in a language of long-term infrastructure and regional stability, while Washington can only speak the language of threats and sanctions. The desperation in the West is now showing in the most unlikely places. Even the Vatican has been forced to step in today, with Pope Francis issuing an unprecedented call for an immediate end to the blockade. When the Pope and the UN become this vocal, it means the back-channel chatter in the intelligence community is starting to use the word nuclear. Iran has been under sanctions for 40 years. They have reached a point where they have nothing left to lose. But the American leadership has everything to lose: an election, a currency, and a global status. The threat of tactical nuclear use is no longer a fringe theory. It is a genuine strategic variable sitting on the desks of the Pentagon today. On the home front, the shaky economy we discussed in April has officially become the broken economy of May. Inflation is no longer a transitory annoyance. It is a structural parasite. Mortgage rates have spiked to historic levels because the US government must pay higher and higher premiums to attract buyers for the debt needed to fund this conflict. For the American middle class, this war is a massive tax they never voted for. We are seeing the first major wave of mass layoffs in tech and retail because consumer spending has cratered under the weight of $5 a gallon gas and $10 a loaf bread. The Project Freedom Abroad is literally costing you your home at home. The much-touted Operation Iron Sentinel has proven to be a failure of doctrine. You simply cannot blockade a ghost. Iranian strategic assets are now fully integrated into the geography of the region. Every time the Navy seizes a ship, Iran strikes a different unprotected pressure point, a pipeline in Iraq, a terminal in the UAE, or a massive cyber attack on a regional power grid. It is a war of 1,000 cuts, and the giant is starting to bleed out. The United States is like a man trying to kill a swarm of hornets with a sledgehammer. The hammer is heavy, it is incredibly expensive, and it is only making the man tired while the hornets remain as lethal as ever. We are now entering a critical 72-hour window that will likely determine the trajectory of the next decade. There are persistent rumors of a grand bargain being offered behind the scenes by China to resolve the ORMUZ crisis. If Trump takes this deal, he effectively admits the end of the American century and the beginning of a multipolar energy market. If he refuses, he risks total naval engagement that could see the first sinking of a US carrier in the modern era, and with it, the final collapse of the myth of American invincibility. The markets are holding their breath, stockpiles are at an all-time low, and the clock is no longer just ticking, it is screaming. History does not repeat, but as the saying goes, it certainly rhymes. In 1914, the elites thought the war would be over by Christmas. In 2026, they thought Iran would collapse in a week. They were wrong both times. The data we are seeing on May 6, 2026 is the obituary of the unipolar world order. You must prepare yourselves not for a return to normal, but for a world where energy is a luxury, money is localized, and the Guanxi of Yale is replaced by the harsh reality of the new Eurasian alliance. I read the documents, so you do not have to. But you must be the ones with the courage to act on the truth. Stay predictive. I will see you when the next filing drops.